Hey there, and welcome back to the Project Style podcast. In today's podcast, we're going to be discussing something very interesting, so I would recommend you stick till the end because today I'm going to be collaborating with my friend Khaled Yousef, who is a psychology student studying at Birmingham University, Dubai, and I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of what we're going to be talking about. So basically, about a few months back, I came to the realization that when it comes to self-improvement, there are two major things to take into consideration, and that is how we're going to approach it. One is discipline and motivation. You can run self-improvement on these two things. You can either run on discipline or you can run on motivation. Running on motivation is only doing self-improvement activities when you feel like doing it, only when you do these productive things, when you have the motivation to do it. And this motivation comes from external sources such as videos, short form videos, or it can come from a podcast like this too, or it can come from speeches, motivational speeches, or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. And you then, only after you hear the motivation, only when you feel motivated, only when you feel like doing it, you go and do the activity. And running on discipline, however, is doing it regardless of how you feel. And basically, I thought about this a lot, especially during my free time or when I was going to sleep, when I was sleeping on bed. The thoughts, my mind wanders a lot, and I was thinking a lot about this very subject because it's very interesting to me. And I did a lot of research in my free time, and I actually learned about this thing called self-talk. And I also read a book called The Self-Talk Solution, I think, by Shad Helmstetter. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but this book, I read the first few chapters of it, and it really taught me the importance of how you speak to yourself. It taught me the importance of words, basically, particularly what you say to yourself about yourself, how you perceive yourself, how you think about yourself, and how you tell others about yourself, how others tell you about yourself, if that makes sense. These words have a lot of influence in your life. I came to this conclusion that basically words are very important in our everyday life, and it's very important especially when it comes to self-improvement. And I was wondering, would it be possible to use these words to your advantage? Would it be possible to use it in a good way? And I realized that this is what affirmations are. I've been preaching affirmations for a while now, but I truly understood why affirmations really work. That is because you tell yourself these positive things and your brain starts to believe it, and then you want to be that thing that you preach that you are to yourself. That's what affirmations are. Affirmation is basically telling yourself positive things, and you are positive. Why does that happen? Because your brain believes it. And that's because of the words. That's why words are really important. Affirmations and self-talk, how you talk to yourself in your mind, what others say about you, are very important. And I'm just going to label it self-talk for now. And I actually used this method, this self-talk method, for a while. I started talking to myself positively. I started doing somewhat, I don't know if we can call it affirmations, but I started talking to myself in a very positive way. I started portraying myself in a very positive way. And I stopped making negative jokes about me. And I distanced myself from people who are negative towards me. I distanced myself from people who are saying negative things about me. And I started prioritizing myself, and I started talking good about myself, and I started thinking good about myself, and I could see a lot of improvement in my life. I also use this for everyday tasks, self-improvement tasks. I did it especially when I wanted to do something when I didn't feel like doing it. This is where the discipline part comes in. As I was saying, the difference between motivation and discipline. Isn't it much easier to do self-improvement activities when you feel like doing it? Isn't it much easier? I was wondering, why can't I take advantage of that? Why can't I make myself feel like doing that? Why isn't that an option? And it turns out that there is an option, and that is making yourself believe that you feel like doing it. And how can you do that? Self-talk. And I started speaking to myself. I started telling myself, I feel like doing this activity. I feel like doing this. I feel like meditating. I feel like going to the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning. I feel like going to the gym before I go to school. I feel like sleeping early. I feel like waking up early. I feel like going to the gym. I feel like doing all these really productive activities. I made myself believe that I felt like doing these activities, all by just telling myself that I feel like doing it. It was very simple, and I was wondering why does this happen? What's the phenomenon behind this? Why do I feel this way? Why is it that when I tell myself I feel like doing it, I go and do it? Why do I actually feel like doing it when I believe that I feel like doing it? It's a very interesting phenomenon, and I came to this conclusion that it's because of the placebo effect. And whenever we think of the placebo effect, it's always negative. We always think of the placebo effect as something negative. We always think of it as something that is basically invalid. I asked myself why. If the placebo effect works, why do we just discard it like it's nothing? And that is why I wanted to do much more research on it, but I don't think there's any better way from learning it from someone who actually researches the human mind a lot for a living. And one of those people is Khaled Yousef, who's my friend who's studying in Birmingham University in Dubai, who's actually a psychology student, and he's pursuing a psychology related career. And I have a set of 12 questions which I'm going to ask him so we can gain a deeper understanding of this phenomenon and try to understand why this truly happens. Why does this phenomenon really happen? What's the science behind it? So I really hope you enjoy this interview. We spent a lot of time and effort into making this happen, and enjoy the interview. Okay, so hi Khaled, and my first question to you is, can the placebo effect work even if someone is aware that it's a placebo?
So that's actually an interesting question, because the thing is, a person from the outside looking in might expect that the person will have the placebo effect work on him or her because they don't know that it's a placebo, right? So if I go to you and I tell you, take this pill and it won't make you more energetic, would you take it? Probably not, right? So it's safe to assume that would be an easy optional answer. However, the thing is though, as we can see, there was an article from Harvard Medical School in 2016, and it actually showed that taking a placebo, it might not cure cancer, it might not make you have better lungs, for example, but what it actually might do is work on the subjective experiences in your mind. So for example, it might work on decreasing pain, decreasing tiredness, and so much more, right? So much that's emotional, psychological. So when it comes to self-improvement, we can kind of think that a placebo can work even if the person knows it's placebo, which I believe we'll touch on why later.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. My second question is, can positive thinking and placebo effect be linked in any way?
Yeah, so there was actually another Harvard Medical School article, this time in 2021, so only about 2 years ago from now. Professor Ted Kapchuk, as his name, he actually explained that the mind-body connection, it actually strengthens due to the placebo, right? So, as I explained earlier, it might not cure cancer, okay? But it can solve the negative side effects of cancer treatments, of insomnia, and these effects that might result from stress, from panic, etc., right? So it might also be noteworthy to mention that a placebo can be preferred over an actual drug. The reason being that since nothing is in the placebo to be addicted to, it's technically speaking safer for the patient, right? So there's no serious issue in that. And psychiatry, as we may know, already has a humongous issue where the patients may get addicted to their prescription pills and the medications. So this is something to note.
Yeah, and yeah, that also brings us to our next question, which is, what are the limitations of the placebo effect in treatment or self-improvement?
So that's an interesting question. Now, the thing is, when it comes to placebos, right, we mainly talk from a medical perspective. When it comes to psychology, it's a bit less common because psychology, and particularly therapy and counseling, they have to do with talk therapy, right? Not as much with psychiatry or doctoral research where pills and surgeries and so on are done. When it comes to a therapist and a client, usually it's talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and psychotherapy, and these kinds of treatments. So when it comes to taking a placebo, let's say the therapist, right, who specializes in psychodynamic therapies, he decides to give a prescription pill of a placebo, of course not an actual drug, to their client. Okay. Now the thing is, there are so many factors that this placebo would have to take a replacement of, or even just mimic or slightly replicate, when it comes to the relationship between the placebo and obviously the therapist and client relationship and factors. So for example, what I'm trying to say, let's say one very important factor in the therapeutic and patient relationship is the therapist's empathy towards the client, right, or towards the patient. So how would a placebo work the same, right? It's kind of logical in that way. There's so many things that we have to replace. The way that the client and therapist talk to one another. How can a placebo work the same? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
another thing that you can also talk about is the client and therapist relationship. It's specifically like the details. Maybe the client thinks that the placebo is actually more effective than it is because the client appreciates the therapist a lot. Maybe the therapist might not explain 100% what a placebo is or how it works, or maybe the client may be misinformed, which of course will lead to humongous ethical issues. There's just so many possible scenarios from both sides that the relationship between them as well, that's a third factor, that makes the placebo unfavorable perhaps. So when it comes to self-improvement though, that actually becomes different. Everyone's on different starting points when it comes to self-improvement. Everyone has different experiences. Everyone has different everything, literally everything. So personally, I've never used a placebo until now, and I've been on self-improvement for almost 3 years. But other people might differ. If I were to reference the Harvard literature once again, I would say that it improves your mindset because you're more capable of doing more good habits, and possibly as a result, since you're doing more good habits, you're going to have less time for the bad habits, right? So several years ago, for example, Lifehacker, they actually also made an article discussing why it helps the average person accomplish their goals. And there were some commenters under the article that claimed that placebos actually worked for them.
Okay. My fourth question is, actually, I've been thinking of this question for a long time because time management is a huge thing when it comes to self-improvement, especially when it comes to being punctual for activities and for scheduling your day, etc. So, can the placebo effect influence our perception of time, thereby improving time management skills?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Honestly, the opening statement you gave was so true. In self-improvement, like one of the main things that we begin to do, especially if we've had a history of not abiding to schedules and being very loose with our day and whatnot, is to start scheduling our day, being more disciplined, more punctual, as you explained. So when it comes to research on whether placebo effect can influence, how we think of time, perceive time, so we become better at managing our time as a result. Honestly, personally, I haven't read any research on that specifically, and honestly, as of now, it doesn't seem that likely. But once again, it might improve other facets of your life, and then as a result, you might be better in managing your time. So maybe, for example, you, as a result of taking the placebo effect, you start going to the gym, and then you find that going to the gym in the mornings is the best thing for you. So you start to go every morning. So that kind of hopefully explains the question. Hopefully that answers.
Yeah, it answered the question properly. And you're right, there's not much research on this, but I think that there probably should be more research based on this phenomenon, because we see that it physiologically changes people mentally and physically when it comes to subjective points of view when it comes to our body. And like, if it can influence our body in some sorts of ways, like, I think it's important to also do research on the other forms of ways it can influence our mind or perception of things. And the fifth question is, how does this is also a question related strongly to self-improvement, and that is willpower. And willpower is extremely important for maintaining discipline, etc., and keeping like consistency when it comes to self-improvement. When it comes to any facet of self-improvement, willpower is extremely important. So my fifth question is, how does the concept of willpower relate to the placebo effect in personal development strategies?
Yeah. So there's this article I've read. It's by the American Psychological Association. It talks about how willpower has actually been positively correlated with many outcomes that we probably aspire for in self-improvement. So higher financial security, higher grades, increased self-esteem, right? We want these in self-improvement. We want better confidence, better marks, a better future in general. Yeah. So according to research, this is true. So to me, anyway, when you believe in the effects of the placebo you've just taken, it can likely make you more devoted, more committed to accomplishing your goals, and would refrain from short-term gratification, and it would probably make you lean towards long-term gratification, and which is probably the main point of willpower.
And also, how does expecting improvement influence our neurological responses in self improvement efforts?
To me, it might improve the mind-body connection. If you've heard of NLP, neuro linguistic programming, people that either practice it or that have done it, they talk about how, due to the improved and the bettered, enhanced mind-body connection, it's actually how the people will improve. So you think of how going to the gym, for example, you do a workout and no one's talking to you, there's no background noise, and there's literally nothing except you and the weights needed. You'll probably make better progress instead of just focusing on anything else, right? Like, since there's nothing to focus on other than you and the weights, you'd probably get through more, you'd probably push yourself more, right?
Yeah, also, like, how does like everyday individuals, like, how can anybody apply placebo effect principles to foster their own self improvement? And this can be self improvement in any facet, like in any form. It doesn't necessarily have to be the traditional self improvement we talk about, which is uh, fitness, meditating, journaling, etc. etc. Like self improvement as a whole to anybody can mean anything. So, in what way can in what way can the placebo effect be used to foster self improvement for literally anybody?
So, what may be talked about regularly in self improvement, consistent habits, scheduled days, so on, it can go hand in hand with the placebo effect. The placebo, they're both done for the sake of self improvement and betterment too. So, I think applying the self improvement practices, reading, writing, journaling, self reflecting, so on, specifically on the placebo, even, can make one prosper in self improvement, since he or she can tell whether he or she needs to take a placebo medicine or not, and whether they know the correct information about the placebo or not, and so on. So, for example, if you're trying to read consistently and you don't really have much to read about, you can read about the placebo effect, learn more about it, see the more recent research on it. You can learn about how it works, So you're both getting the reading in and you're learning more about the placebo. And from there, you decide on how much to take it, how often you should take it, whether you should take it or not, and so on.
Okay. And how also this channel is called Project Stoic, so and it's necessarily something based on Stoicism, and
Yeah.
I've actually been thinking about this a lot. This specific combination of Stoicism and our controlling our minds, so basically hacking your mind. And I was wondering, right? So, like, how does the Stoic philosophy in any way intersect with using the placebo effect for personal growth?
That's actually interesting. So, to me, it may be about getting the hard work done when a person's not at all in the mood for it. So, I'm not an expert on Stoicism personally, but according to what I've read, one of the main ideas of Stoicism is the idea to remain calm, cool, collected in both the good and the bad times. So perhaps a way that Stoicism interacts with the placebo effect is that, since the placebo effect mainly betters a person's life, right? You're not taking a placebo effect so that you get cancer, right? You obviously want to improve something, right? So Stoicism is more of a way to understand life, in my eyes anyway. So perhaps a principle of Stoicism in relation to the placebo effect would be to adapt to new ideas, become a stronger and more capable person. So a Stoic person, or a follower of Stoicism, or whatever it might be called, would be willing to act upon the placebo effect. So it wouldn't just be like for the sake of it, right? It would be both for new experiences and for more progress.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. And how does the placebo effect contribute to recovery and self improvement? Like, there are a lot of times I think anybody who's listening to this podcast can relate, including you and me. It is a lot of times in certain point where we hit rock bottom, and getting up is like one of the hardest things when it comes to self improvement. And this can be in anything, like honestly, your career, your academics, fitness, whatever it is. We always hit rock bottom at one point of time, but getting up is very difficult. So I was wondering, right? Can the placebo effect contribute to recovery in self improvement? And if yes, how does it contribute?
So I think it could be a good thing to depend on when you're slacking on self-improvement because of the positive results it attains, both from peer-reviewed research and from people's experiences. If you see the comment section, I took this placebo and so on and so forth, it really benefited me. Now, when you act upon the placebo effect after not accomplishing as much as you wish, it can sort of put you back on track, and you'd be better able to restrain yourself from bad habits, like as we explained it earlier with the short-term gratification versus long-term gratification.
Okay. And that brings us to our final question. So, how does the placebo effect play a role in the influence of what others tell you about yourself? This can be colleagues, classmates, or friends. Do these words actually affect us, whether positive or negative? Do these words which others tell us, do they affect us in any way? If yes, how?
So the placebo effect in and of itself, it doesn't have that much, if possibly anything, to do with social factors. So perhaps it'll make you more committed to a goal in your mind that has to do with other people around you, but it won't increase your emotional intelligence, for example. Right? You might need to have something in mind and then take a placebo or act on the placebo effect.
We've read this from Atomic Habits as well. If you've read the book, we see that we have to change the way we talk about ourselves. We should not say, I've quit, I'm trying to quit gaming. You're supposed to say, I'm not a gamer, I quit gaming. I don't play games. You're supposed to, you can see that what you say about yourself shapes your character in a lot of ways. And does placebo in any way play a role in this process of self-talk and psychological uh, psychological processes when it comes to self-talk?
Yeah, I think I get what you mean now. So when it comes to positive self-talk, self-affirmations, the example that you gave, yeah, that's very helpful in the self-improvement space. When you convince yourself that you're not this negative identity anymore, or that you're actually this new positive identity. So when it comes to stoicism and the placebo effect, and how they may intertwine, or like let's say rather not stoicism, just in general positive self-talk affirmations, you can say that they go hand in hand to some extent, because like I explained earlier, like the placebo effect's already been shown to correlate with better improved outcomes. Now when you get into the self-improvement space and you start to talk with like-minded people, or so-called brothers, and you get engage in wiser discussions, it's safe to say that these people might have enhanced results even quicker than the average participants in the research studies that we often hear about.
Okay.
Hopefully that.
Yeah, that absolutely does answer my question. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you for joining me, Khaled. And his channel will be linked in the description or tagged or whatever. Show him some support. He really did a lot of research in order to be a part of this interview. And follow, like, show us a lot of support. And I see you next time. Bye.
Thank you very much, Sid. It was an honor to be here.